Thank you for joining Jacob City Fishing, where the goal is learning to live in the great outdoors found as we walk outside of our homes into nature and society. Colossians 1:15-23. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. And you, who once were alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he is now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him. If indeed you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you heard, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, became a minister. Have you ever heard of a biosphere? There's one owned and operated by the University of Arizona. A biosphere is a controlled natural environment. Some time ago, the scientists overseeing the biosphere at the university made an interesting discovery. If there is no wind, the speed in which trees would grow increases, but they could never mature. It turns out wind plays a substantial part in the maturing and strength of trees and other plants. What could, at high levels, destroy a tree also makes it stronger. In the case of the Colossians and Christians through time, winds would come in the form of challenges to the gospel. False teachers have, continued, and will come and tempt Christians to deny the God who saved them. We and the Colossians must start with the being and character of Christ. Paul just presented important truths of who God is and his good pleasure to have Christ reconcile all things and bring peace to the world. Paul then clearly states man's state without Christ before God, which is at enmity with him. We must hold fast to what he has done as Christians and not add anything to it, as the Colossian philosophers were enticing the Christians to do. Paul encouraged the Christians to maintain deep roots in the gospel so as to encourage them to be protected from false teaching. What Paul is stating is false teachers will tempt believers to be blown over by their enticing words. This rejection is in the context of faith in the gospel, meaning, as believers, our ignorance of the gospel, laziness with the gospel, and or lack of loyalty to the gospel can lead us to ultimately reject the one who is at the center of the good news. These are legitimate believers rejecting the one who reconciled them, and there are no second chances. Sinning in this way is not a singular action. The rejection of faith in the gospel is a process which each person must regulate before the merciful, gracious, loving, holy, and just God. One sin does not mean rejection by God. However, the one sin can be like leaven, moving through the heart like yeast which takes over all of the dough. If you do not understand how to respond to false teachings influencing the church, such as critical theory, intersectionality, hegemony, queer theory, annihilationism, which is a rejection of the eternal consequence and judgment of God, liberation theology, or many other false teachings, then learn about them, seek the scriptures, and be educated about the connection these and other false teachings have in relation to the gospel. Do not be swayed by the world. Do not seek to change what Christ has done or diminish the state sin places humans in before the holy God, who is pleased to rescue them from their guilt and enslavement to sin. Thank you for taking a moment to consider what God has to say during your adventure outdoors. Please click the subscribe button below along with the notifications button on the YouTube channel so you learn how to survive and thrive in these great outdoors.